I'm Carol Kauffman, co-author of Real-Time Leadership with David Noble. The worst advice I ever got, maybe you have, was just keep doing what you're doing. It's really working.
Just keep doing what you're doing. Carol, who gave you that advice? Why would they say that?
Well, a lot of people kind of overdo the strengths thing, like what you do that's best, keep doing it. But that can really throw you into what we call your default mode of doing what's always worked in the past. And now you need to pivot to the future and to be able to be agile in real time rather than just keep doing what you're doing.
Good. When you got that advice, I mean, did you know that it was the worst advice, or did that come out over the years?
No, I did not know it was bad advice, but it just, what is it that Einstein's definition of insanity? If you keep doing the same thing and you expect a different outcome, you're insane.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we're not crazy here, but we are going to talk about real-time leadership. So first, congratulations on your book, David, Carol. Wonderful book. Good stuff. Good stuff. So thank you for sharing an advanced reader copy with me. So David, I'm going to pivot over to you here. So why did you write the book?
Why did we write the book? Well, Carol and I basically work at the top of the house globally across all kinds of different industries in public sector, private sector, and not-for-profit NGOs. And we pull together our learnings from decades of experience in different fields, actually, and then also working together. And we wanted to share that with a broader group of people because we think real-time leadership actually applies to any leader and any aspiring leader, and can also apply at your own home, in your own house as well. So we just wanted to share the word.
Awesome. And Carol, what is real-time leadership? Like, can you sum that up for us here before we start getting into some of the key points?
Well, it's many things, but essentially real-time leadership is making the most of every moment and also creating that space between what's being thrown at you and what you're going to catch. So how do you make that space to make real-time choices? And the book will help you make that space, but it also, what to do when you find it. So real-time leadership is really seeing what's really out there in the moment and being able to respond to it.
Leadership in the moment. It's tough. I mean, that's a hard thing to do. So it's not just doing what we always did, as you mentioned, as bad insight, but figuring out what we're going to do next. So either one of you, how long did this take you to cogitate and come up with this, or is this something that hits you and said, "Yep, this is it," and we've always done it this way?
3 weeks.
Awesome. Cool.
Start to finish.
I kind of figured that. Wow,
yeah, we started working together in 2015, and then just through serendipity, at some point we were working with meeting with the same client, and just found the power of 2-on-1 coaching that kind of combines everything that we've got. And so we built a framework from there. So it's been like a 5-year journey in total to build the framework, write the book, and now to get it published.
And what's great about it is we're each other's biggest fan. So David comes from the background of, he was the CEO of the first digital bank, managing partner of 2 major strategy firms whose name you know, and operating executive, and then came with that power background into coaching. And my background is a clinical psychologist, specialized in trauma survivors. I've been teaching at Harvard since I was 12. And really coming from that perspective. And then both of us have a lot of coaching experience. So what we draw on in the book, it really is big, like, positive psychology, behavioral psychology, military strategy, business strategy. It's like a big funnel that we then try to make kind of really usable for people.
Excellent. So military and business aren't often connected there. So why did you connect those? Did one of you serve in the military, or where's that connection come from?
No, we both collaborate with a retired 4-star general by the name of Chuck Jacoby, who held battlefield positions and also was responsible for Northern Command, which is a massive, massive responsibility. And he taught us this notion of commander's intent. in the military, which is basically how do you take a mission and be able to decentralize it, not just to your team, but across the entire organization, so that people, when they're out in real time facing real time conditions and you're not in the room or on the ground, they can actually make decisions that would be in alignment with the direction that you want to go and the way that you want to behave from a moral integrity perspective or a decision-making perspective. So we took that and adapted that to what we call leader's intent. So it's a riff on that notion, and it's a very powerful way to decentralize and align an entire organization.
The other part of it that I love. So first of all, 4-star general. Like I'm such an idiot. I didn't know there weren't a lot of them. And David's like, there's only one 5-star general, Carol. I'm like, oh, okay, good to know. I had no idea how impressive he was. But one of the things he said that we loved, he goes, well, what is a general? Okay, now this is really relevant to leaders, particularly leaders who are moving up in organization. And he said a general is a generalist, which means I don't need to know what my colonels know. My colonels need to know more than I do. And then the second part of the leadership signals is do what only you can do. And so I think for a lot of us, when we rise up in an organization, we just add on to like, okay, I'm a subject matter expert, I'm a this, and now I'm a leader of leaders. And he's really very good about identifying what can only you do.
That's very interesting because, yeah, to your point, a lot of leaders don't do that. They continue to add on. What, as you coach leaders, what reason do you find, and what obstacles prevent them from actually doing that? Like, why do they say that they don't do that? Why they have to add on?
So I think just to extend the analogy for the military, once you're a 1-star general, you by definition step into something that's a bigger scale and scope than you've ever seen before. So you don't know how to do it. So there are lots of different reactions to that are possible. So one is, you know what, I'm just going to focus on what I know and then completely delegate everything to everybody else. Another reaction, equally bad, is, wow, I don't know all this stuff, so I'm going to second guess and micromanage you all to death until I figure out what's going on here. So the best leaders basically figure out the 3 or 4 things. There's not usually more than 3 or 4 things in any position that are really reserved for you to act on. So for a CEO, for example, it's like, what's the strategy of the organization? What's the vision of the organization? Doesn't mean that you create it all by yourself, but you kind of own that. Or taking decisions about major M&A and things like that. But beyond that, that's what you've got teams for. And obviously you have to have the right team in place and the right capabilities in place. But then you can just sort of trust and selectively verify that everything's going the way it should go. So that's kind of the theory behind it.
So we tell one story in the book. We call the guy Leo. I loved Leo. And he was a subject matter expert par excellence, machine learning, AI, whatever. He knew it all and was head of a big sort of place where they were developing many, many, many different things. And there were the equivalent of labs. And so he had about 300 under his umbrella and was doing a really good job. And then all of a sudden it doubled. And now we had 600. And he needed, and leaders need to be able to transcend the colonel role when you're becoming a general. Like, I am the subject matter expert, so now I have to be super subject matter expert. And so, you put on my super subject matter expert cape and fly around. So he made a confession and he said, okay, Carol, I'm really not on top of all of this new material. So I have hired experts and they're privately coaching me. And we're going through all of the different, organizations so that I can really know more and be able to show them I know what I want. And in which case I cracked up laughing and said, like, oh, really? And you're thinking that's a good plan? And I said, wait, what is your actual role as a leader? And what are you actually great at? And the thing was, he was wonderful at getting followership. I mean, everybody loved this man. And so it didn't take much for him to realize his plan was moronic and he would feel bad at best, and realized, no, my job is to help all these leaders create the environment where the best innovation can take place. And so instead of this power, drill down on every research project, that your forte is dinner parties. You can't do that at work, but how do you just arrange kind of a warm setting for everyone? So he did, and even he brought the 2 experts with him. So they were there as experts, and he learned to, lead and transcend this need to, know everything.
Wow, that's awesome. That's good help from you on helping him be aware that is not a good plan, because a lot of times leaders want to lead and think they're the sole lead, right? They're the smartest person in the room, and certainly they might be the most resourceful, but seldom do they know everything enough to run the whole room. Is that what you found in your work as well?
Look, there are cases where you've got subject matter experts leading a bunch of individual producers, and sometimes that pure subject matter expertise is really important to leadership. So it's not that it's not important, but as you get into really, really complex, broad scale challenges, then you can't rely on one all-seeing, all-knowing person. So it doesn't work that way. So you've got to make the most of not just your team, but all kinds of trusted advisors inside your organization and outside your organization to kind of figure out what's going on, and then to really co-create what we call the leader's intent with your team and others, so that people truly are on board when you want to take a direction.
And also leadership has really changed from the whole command and control model. It's now fluid and flatter. And so, as David said, yes, it's so complex. You shouldn't depend on one person. But also the whole philosophy of how we lead has really changed, that it's more now a team approach, not I'm out in the front taking the hill approach.
Awesome. So, David, with that, you've got some really bad advice that you've gotten that you'd like to share. So go ahead, kind of reintroduce yourself, if you will, and share that advice, please.
Sure. I'm David Noble, and I'm co-author of Real-Time Leadership, How to Find Your Winning Moves When the Stakes Are High. And the worst advice I ever got, I'll be really brief, is turn right.
Turn right. Okay, so you got to tell us, David, why is that such bad advice?
I was a young beginner skier, and I got lost in quite a steep mountain, and it was snowing. And I was looking for guidance from the people behind me, and I looked behind, and I saw them all screaming at me to turn right. So I did turn right, and I ended up almost going over a cliff and was rescued by the ski patrol as they set a lifeline for me, literally pulled me back up before I went over the cliff. And the reason that this is like quite compelling in our current world is that in real-time leadership, we talk about sending leadership signals. So the most important leadership signal is your leadership intent, but then you're always gathering and learning and testing and learning stuff as you go along. And the most important principle is make sure the signal received is the signal sent. People were actually waving me away. They said, "Don't turn right," and I heard "turn right."
Don't.
Yeah. So I've learned to ask more questions.
That's fun. Yeah, but restate and get clarity, right, before you move.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Well, speaking about move is your whole your framework through which you talk about real-time leadership, being mindfully alert, generating options, validating your vantage point, and engage and affect change. So let's talk a little bit. We won't have time to talk about all of them, or maybe we will. But do you want to start with the M, or is there somewhere better to start as we start the conversation more about the real-time leadership?
M sounds good.
Okay,
great.
I'll jump in for the bit, and then David can continue. So M is to be mindfully alert. And this was really David's offering when we started thinking about that, because he does these 10-day retreats and is one of the more mindful people I've ever met. But then we took it further. So mindful being sort of open, beginner's mind, noticing, but alert like an elite athlete, where you're aware of what's going on like outside of you, the outer game, what's going on inside of you, your inner game, and then what's going on around you. So those we call the 3 dimensions of leadership.
Yeah, basically, if in a nutshell, it's what do you want or need to get done? Then who do you want to be as a person, as a leader while you're doing this in terms of your character strengths and behaviors? And then how best can you relate to others to really unlock their potential? So those are the 3 dimensions of leadership.
And they're always intertwined. And you can know people who are great at getting the numbers and they like steamroll over their people, but then you know people who are all like into love, etc., and they don't get anything done. But it really is all 3, particularly when you're under the high stakes, high pressure situations that we're in now.
That's interesting. I don't think a lot of leaders recognize that they need all 3. I think a lot of times they lean, on their strongest 1, maybe 2, and then 1 is completely absent and atrophied. So how do we help leaders recognize that there are those 3 different dimensions?
I think one of the things in just creating that space so that you don't always reflex into your old behaviors, into your old playbook, is simply to consciously name those things. So it's actually to elevate this to a place where people are thinking, it's like, well, what do I actually need to do in this next meeting? Is it to get approval for initiative I'm proposing? Or wait a minute, maybe it's actually to give other people a voice so that I can have a better input and make a better decision the next time around. So there's that. So just start thinking about what do you want to do. And then Carol is the expert on the internal dimension about who do you want to be right now. And then, how do you start thinking about relating to people? And there's different stances of relating. So we're all familiar with lean in, but Carol basically came up with 3 other possible stances to relate to people. So I'll hand it over to Carol.
In any situation, this comes from evolutionary theory in a way. We've got fight, flight, freeze, and befriend. And befriend is as powerful as the other reflexes. And just think of a bus hurtling down on a toddler and you don't actually think, should I, oops, you just grab the child. So that's the equivalent of leaning in, being very active, engaging. It could be with high positive emotion, high negative emotion, but it's that intensity in connecting. And then leaning back is I want the data, things to be objective. Then leaning with is, caring about the other person first. And on a bigger scale, it might be people and culture. And not leaning is the toughest one. Not leaning is the discipline to do nothing. Something is hurtling at you and everything inside you is screaming, catch it, throw it back, or duck. And it's like, I just need to stay here. And that's very hard to do. And then what it is then you can open yourself up to other kinds of knowledge. So that's like you're running and something hits you. That's kind of what from don't lean. So in any situation, how do you do that? Whether it's, what you need to do to buy a company, what it is that you need to kind of your relationship to your intensity of your own personal development or your relationships. So it's, do you need to lean in, back, with, or don't lean?
That's interesting. I would have expected the with. That with makes sense. Yeah, but the don't lean is not something that I'm used to hearing at all, right? The don't move. As a leader, like leaders are always in motion, it feels like. And maybe that's the challenge. Maybe that's the problem with leaders, right? Is they're always doing instead of, as you put in your book, being. Is that right?
It's interesting. You just made me think of a story of my own life, which I never put it together till this moment. But I'll make it short. Is I used to work with violent horses, and there was one horse that I would go out into the field to catch him or whatever, and I would yell out his name, and he would come galloping to me, and literally when he was like 5 feet away, he's at a full gallop. And it's really interesting because what I did was I didn't move. And what I found out later was that was stallion combat behavior. And in fact, the leader or the one who doesn't move when, 800 pounds of, intense horse flesh is galloping at you, or a chair is screaming at you, as David has some great stories of people like freaking out, and he just doesn't move and says, oh, well, is that what you're thinking about? Blah, blah, blah. When the chair is like lost his head and screaming and everybody's under their desks, this ability to not move really is important. So thanks for making me think of that.
So it's a really important dimension when you think about it, and it's underused. So if you think in times, particularly if they're really complex things and you don't know the path through, just taking that moment to see if something rises in your intuition, because sometimes intuition can be incredibly helpful and valid. And then other times, so many leaders, particularly those who lean in all the time, they just feel the need for action. They're going to rescue somebody. Rescuing someone in each and every case as a leader is not always good for their development or for the outcome, the best outcome. So you don't always have to step in and rescue someone.
That's a good reminder for all of us. You mentioned that the book is also good in relationships, right? Sometimes it's best just to listen and pause. And I'll tell you, I know that I need work on that. So that's a good reminder to me too. So that's really good. So
I'd love to make a plug. Here's the plug. For you guys listening, and you're hearing a little bit about the M and the O, the V, E, if you'd like to assess yourself, we came up with a self-assessment, and we created a real-time leadership institute.com, which is just too much to write. So real-time leadership, RTL leadership institute, rtlinstitute.com. And you can learn more about the model, but also you could take the self-assessment, which is really interesting to sort of see where are you really better and where do you need to grow, because none of us can be good at all of these.
Yeah, for sure. I looked at the assessment. I didn't finish taking it, but I checked it out and I thought it was very interesting there at rtlinstitute.com for sure. So lots of awesome stuff there. So good plug there for sure. Yeah, absolutely. So with that, let's pick maybe two other letters here. Let's talk about validating your vantage point, because generating options, I think most people know that you can't just have one answer to that. But let's talk about validating your vantage point. Explain that one, and how do we get there?
So I'll start, and Carol's really the expert on this, but just in a nutshell, once you have established those three dimensions of leadership, what you want to get done, who you want to be as a leader, and how you want to relate, and then once you set a whole bunch of options for how you're going to achieve those three dimensions, it's basically taking a step back and saying, well, wait a minute, have I exaggerated or discounted any of the opportunities or threats that are in front of me? Am I seeing reality for what it is? Am I possibly just completely missing the point? So it's a good check to ask yourself questions, but it's also about perspective taking.
Yeah. So basically, if you don't validate your vantage point at your peril, because many of us are fast thinkers and we actually think we're right. But 75% of small business failures, for example, are due to over optimism and not under optimism or insecurity. So for those of us who tend to think we're right, if you don't validate your vantage point, you can really hurt yourself. So this is where ego becomes a really big issue. So if you sort of are sort of too full of yourself, it's dangerous. You need to stop and validate the vantage point. And to also know, a question I ask myself often is, if I'm going to get this wrong, how is it that I'm going to get it wrong? So if I'm going to see something, so maybe you're a little on the vigilant side and, you decide somebody's there to undermine you. Well, are you really? Or maybe you're too much on the trusting side and you automatically think someone has your best interest at heart. Well, do they really? So that's where just pausing and naming things is really helpful. And another part of it is to think about where you can go wrong and where you can go right, which is, how clear is your vantage point? Basically, do you have rose-colored glasses, charcoal-colored glasses? Are you nearsighted? You're good with what's close, but far is blurry. Are you farsighted and you see the future, but not the now? And then, the right sort of breadth, and depth. So what are the ways that you can really kind of zoom in, zoom out, really look at it? And it doesn't have to take very long, but you can just say, am I really seeing what I'm seeing? David?
Wow.
Yeah, no, I think that captured it.
Yeah, I think that does a really good job of capturing it. So with that, before we talk about the the engage and affect change. I just want to give you a shout out here. In the book, one of the best things that I found is every chapter has a summary. So for those that are leaders that are busy, you can start with the summary, and then the ones that resonate most, you can jump back in and go deeper, or you could, just go through the summaries and then read the book cover to cover like I did. And I think you'll find a lot of good stuff. So great job putting that together in the book, because it makes it, thank you very much, Carol. Yep, there's a good example of that. For those that are watching, those that are listening, you'll have to imagine it. Picture a book, good summary. So there we go, right? So
close your eyes. And
that's right. Yep. Exactly. Unless you're driving, then don't close your eyes.
Don't do it.
Important.
Look out, look out.
So don't.
There'll be an audiobook too.
Turn right. Turn right.
Exactly. Cool. Well, as we kind of bring us home here, I got one more question here before I ask kind of the ultimate question, and that is about engage and affect change. Probably I would argue probably the most important one for a leader is to actually make things different, right? To transform and to do all of that. So explain that and how that plays in through after you get through the rest of the word, if you will.
Sure. Well, basically being mindfully alert to those three dimensions, creating options and validating your vantage point, that's all leading up to taking this and actually applying it at scale. So you apply it at scale primarily through what we've called leader's intent. So leader's intent is a leader often co-creating with his or her team, being able to say, look, this is where we're going. This is why we're going there. Here's all the milestones along the way to know that we're winning so that we can celebrate along the way or course correct as necessary. And then here's generally speaking how we're going to get there. Now, there's many different ways to a win, as you talked about earlier, Phil, but some things are more desirable than others. So for example, if you're growing your business, are you going to do it through organic means only, or are you looking at M&A? If you're only doing it organically, is it through new product development? Is it through geographic extensions? Is it through deepening customer relationships? Whatever that might be. So those are kind of the options. And then the V, the validating your vantage point in this big kind of scaled application is, well, what's the reality of the world that we're operating in? What kind of financial constraints have we got? What kind of behavioral constraints have we got in terms of acting in accordance with our values and our culture? And, what kind of time constraints have we got around this? So you pull all those things together, and that allows you to send the first really important leadership signal. And then once you've done that, it doesn't end there, because as we talked about with my ski incident, you've got to make sure the leadership signals that are sent are those that are received, and that you're always learning as you're going forward. So we took a page out of design thinking when we were doing this, and just imagine your leader's intent is like a prototype. We're going to try this. And then when it survives or doesn't survive contact with reality, we learn and update that and iterate that. So that's really about E, is where everything comes together and you drive things at scale.
So that's an example at the top of the house, but David mentioned earlier that it can also work in your house. So I'll give you that example from a while ago. My son Michael at that time was 11. It's the end of a long day. I come in and he's doing his homework on the dining room table. It's like a squalor mess. And he's like, okay, can I watch TV now? I look at this mess. Okay, now think about 3 dimensions of leadership, okay? And think about, well, the external one is, well, what is my task right now? Like if you go into automatic default, it's like, let's get the homework done, and, is this, but it's like, wait a minute, what is my task in this moment? Is it to get this homework assignment done? Is it to teach him discipline? Is it to teach him to love learning? And then in terms of my inner growth, have I got enough resilience right now to choose how I respond? Do I, lean in and really engage, or lean back, etc.? And then how do I want to relate? So you've got the 3 dimensions of leadership and the O, and then the V is looking at the vantage point of like, what's really important here? How do I really, check my initial impression? So for me, I actually, which is unusual for me, decided that it wasn't get the homework done, which was my reflex. Normal me, lean in, get the homework done. Okay. And in this case, it's like, no, the love loving to learn is more important. And then I just paused. And then the question hit me, and I just said, Michael, here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at your homework and ask yourself, am I proud of my work? And if you are, go watch TV. And I left the room. Now, he didn't exactly stay an hour, but it did have him sort of think and reflect for a moment. And he did a little bit more, and then he went off. But this is all about real-time leadership, big moments, little moments. So that's like a little moment. And probably everybody listening, you're going to have a bunch of these little moments. And the big question for you to ask yourself, okay, you're in your car. Okay, maybe you're actually in your car right now, and maybe somebody behind you is really slow and you're ready to get mad, and then just stop. Second dimension of leadership, inner. Ask yourself, who do I want to be right now? Who do I want to be right now? Or you're about to go into a tough meeting and you're thinking, well, here's all these speech anxiety tips. Well, wait a minute. In front of this group, who do you want to be right now? Who do you need to be right now? So all of this works, again, in the big moments and little moments, but we all need to make the most of those moments.
Wow. How old is your son that he was prescient enough to understand being proud?
Oh, at that time he was 11. He's now much more grown up.
Cool. No, I was just curious because I have a 7-year-old.
He does love learning, by the way.
That's fantastic. Yeah. I was just thinking about my 7-year-old and if he would understand that word, because we struggle with that sometimes too. So, but something like that, I think just pausing and asking yourself, who do I want to be, right? Where do I want to take this and how can I help this is a great example.
And what's my real job right now? What's my real job right now?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Cool. Well, as we're wrapping up here, I've got to ask, and David, I'm going to start with you because Carol got to introduce herself first.
Sure.
How do we get started on the real-time leadership? I don't know. Let's call it on the get on the program, right? Because this is kind of a way of doing things that is going to be different for a lot of people. So you go first, David, and then Carol, then we'll go to you.
So I think, as Carol said, go to rtlinstitute.com, and there's lots of resources there. There's a self-assessment there. There's an excerpt of the book. There's some videos. There's a pre-order button. So I think that's the first kind of practical step. And there's also an HBR magazine article that just was released last week. So that's on the power of options. So that's highly recommended to get familiar with the model. But I think the most important thing is to, start with the M, to realize that, in some cases our reflexes aren't going to be the best kind of response to a situation, especially if it's something new that we're facing, a new type of crisis, or even like an amazing new type of 10x opportunity that we've never seen before. So, recognize that your reflexes might not be best, and then start to think about when and how you can overcome them. And just start to think about 3 dimensions of leadership. So the easiest thing to do to get started is ask yourself those 3 questions. What do I really want or need to get done? Who do I want to be as a leader? Do I want to be more compassionate? Do I want to have more perspective, more judgment, listen better? Whatever that might be that you want to cultivate. And then how can I relate to others in a more agile way? So if I'm leaning in all the time, can I think about, well, maybe I should think about leaning back in some cases, or leaning with, or not leaning. So I would start there.
I would start now. So in the next hour, there's going to be some opportunity for you to think, what's actually most important here? So I would like you to do that. So for example, the question, who do I want to be right now? When I started that, I asked myself that 80 times one day. And it's fabulous for when you're cranky, because when you're just about to be like, really? And I think, who do I want to be right now? It's like, oh, I really do not want to be something that rhymes with itch. I want to, so practice now. In the next hour, there is an opportunity for you to ask yourself, what do I really need to do? Who do I want to be? How do I want to relate? And just start there.
Wow. Great insight. Well, again, congratulations on the book. It's Real-Time Leadership, David Noble and Carol Kauffman. If you go to rtlinstitute.com, friends, you can get an assessment. You can read an excerpt. learn more in that HBR article about the O, which we didn't cover today, and even more. So, Carol, David, thank you both.
And buy the book.
time. Yes.
You can buy the
And
book.
of course.
Hardcover
Of course.
book.
Well,
Buy the book.
yes.
Help
Yes.
us hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list. Buy a book. Email us. Let
Yes.
us know you did, and we will do something.
Thank
for
you, Phil. Thank you. Wonderful host.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thanks
Like
for
your
your
glasses.
insight. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you both.